Good evening, everyone. I'm Charles Gross.
And I'm Leslie Hoban Blake. Welcome to Two on the Aisle. We have a returning guest critic and also friend of both of ours, Brian Scott Lipton, who is the theater critic for the City Tour website. Today, the boys will be talking about Kinky Boots, which I think is very appropriate.
And Leslie, we will see you later. And the show we are reviewing today is Kinky Boots. If you liked what you saw on Broadway a few years ago, well, you're probably going to like this version very much because it's essentially the same version moved from Broadway to an off-Broadway theater. Same director, choreographer, Jerry Mitchell, same set, basically the same production. And this is, of course, the story of a young man who had decided to leave his family's shoe business and go to the big city, London in this case, but after his father suddenly dies, he comes back and attempts to rescue the factory by stopping their line of well-made men's shoes and developing a line of kinky boots. But he doesn't have to do it alone. He has help.
Yes, he does. And it's very unlikely help in the form of a drag queen entertainer named Lola, who he encounters while in a pub in London, and in fact tries to stop her from being attacked. But the reality is she's much stronger than he is. She's actually she is a trained professional boxer. But from this, he takes one look at her quote unquote kinky boots, a high-heeled spandexy number, and realizes that that might be the key to saving the factory. And such an unlikely partnership and eventually unlikely friendship is born. And that creates the crux of, this very entertaining musical, which won the Tony back in 2013 for Best Musical.
Right. And the questions, will Charlie be able to save his factory or at least get his new line of kinky boots to the fashion show in Milan on time? Will the factory workers accept Lola? Is Charlie actually able to fill the shoes of his father and his grandfather, etc.? Well, the book is by Harvey Fierstein. The score is by Cyndi Lauper. Of course, we're going to have a happy ending here.
Yes, and we do, which is wonderful. And my one real caveat about the show, which didn't change from 2013, is I think the questions that you posed as the challenges of where we get to the obvious happy ending are the challenges we needed to focus on. Unfortunately, halfway through the second act, Charlie turns completely on Lola.
Well, it's not just that he turns on Lola. He basically turns on his entire staff. He's mortgaged his home.
He's frightened.
He's broke. He's in over his head, and he lets it get to him. Not just with Lola, but with all of his factory workers. And ironically, it is one of the workers, I don't know what the British equivalent of a redneck is, but the worker is Don, who is very unaccepting of Lola at first, but they develop a mutual respect for each other. And Don comes and says, no, look, he was there for us. We need to be there for him. And Sean Steele plays the role. And, Lola is supposed to be fabulous, but I think in this case, he makes his character the most fabulous one in the show.
Well, he certainly, rises to the challenge. And yes, there's a great value in watching this very overweight, as you said, quote unquote, rednecky guy, sporting these boots and really accepting another, maybe more feminine side of himself. But as far as who's the most fabulous, you and I may differ on this production because we saw different Lolas. I was very blessed to see Callum Francis, who is part of, really the reason this production maybe exists. He was the last Lola on Broadway. He did it in Australia where he won the Helpman Award. He won it in London. And he's an incredibly charismatic performer, full of grace, full of beauty, full of muscles as it happens. He really incorporates every facet of Lola. He's a wonderful singer and he's very vulnerable. He really deep down reaches Lola's alter ego, if you want to say, he's born a man called Simon and has been rejected by his father. And when we see the glimpses of Simon, Callum does a really wonderful job of making you feel that and making you really, really, even if you don't already sympathize with Lola.
Lola is basically a facade for Simon. And the actor I saw, Nick Drake, I think also pulled that off very well. There's, a wonderful scene where he's entertaining as Lola in an old age home. And as it happens, that's where his father, who is either senile or has dementia and probably doesn't realize he's there, is living. My problem with Nick Drake was that he was not quite as fabulous as I expect Lola to be. He gave a good, solid performance, but Lola needs to be fabulous. And Nick, right. I'm sure he will be fabulous in the role, but he's got some work to do to get there. Christian Douglas gave a very good performance as Charlie. Charlie is not an easy role because he's kind of a bland character, and both literally and figuratively, he's Lola's straight man. But I really felt that he pulled it off. I more or less agree with you that having Charlie lose it in the middle of the play does feel a little artificial.
Just to be clear, I agree with everything you said. My objection, which has not changed in 10 years and 3 performances, is only that he turns on Lola and says some very homophobic things. And that's not just because, I'm a gay man. It's not believable to the character.
I think you're right. And I'm straight, but it did seem that he was going a little, that it was unnecessary. And that even given his situation, I don't think he
would say those things about her. He might say all those other things. But to Christian Douglas's part, he plays it with complete believability. Yeah. He's incredibly charismatic. He's really quite handsome. I think he's actually a little too good looking for the part and a little too charismatic because Charlie talks so much about how he doesn't believe in himself, and the people at the factory first treat him a little bit like, oh, he's just a little kid. And as you said, the role's a little bland. But on the other hand, I think, especially also given the intimacy of this space, it was nice to have somebody who really stood out. And we didn't really talk before about his singing voice, which I think is extraordinary. He gets a couple of really big numbers, including one called Soul of a Man. And I mean, I've never heard it that well sung.
I liked Danielle Help as Lauren, who's one of the workers in his factory, who eventually helps him along with the conversion to Kinky Boots and becomes his girlfriend.
Yes, I mean, I thought she was talented and charming. I wish they had given her, I felt Jerry Mitchell might have given her maybe a little more freedom to do the role as she wanted to, but it seemed very much that she was almost carbon copying Annalee Ashford, who did it originally. And this is the role that, sort of vaulted Annalee Ashford to stardom. So maybe the theory is if it's not broke, don't fix it. But, you always want an actor to be able to put their own stamp on something.
Absolutely. And I think you're right there. And I will say, whenever I'm depressed, I put on Annalee Ashford singing Charlie. Makes me feel better. Brianna Stout, who plays Nicola, she is the Charlie's fiance, the girl trying to get him away from the factory and into London.
Yes. I can't say anything good or bad about her performance. I mean, I think it was fine, but the role to me is so misguidedly not necessary. I just always have felt like it's a thankless role and it could have not been there. And
it's definitely...
Lena Hall did it the first time. If somebody as talented as she is couldn't do anything with the role, that's proof positive that the role can't be done.
On the whole, if I were to rate it on a 1 to 5 playbill countdown, 5 being amazing, 1 being don't bother, I would give it 4 playbills.
I would also give it 4 playbills, and I'd like to take this opportunity. I think because it did just close 3 years ago, it had a 6-year run. There are a whole lot of people out there who think, I don't need to see this again, or if I didn't see it the first time, why do I need to see it now? And I would say to everybody, you do need to either see it again or see it for the first time. You will not regret it. I think it's almost a double-edged sword that it's off-Broadway because people think, oh, maybe Dinky Boots, it's very scaled down. It's like going to a Broadway show.
It's nice to come to something like Kinky Boots, a nice, light, entertaining evening. I think it is time to bring back our beloved Leslie Hoban Blake.
Oh, thank you for the beloved. That was very sweet. You guys did a total job. Most of the questions that I had, you've already answered. So here's one. The difference between New World Stages, where several other shows have gone from Avenue Q to Jersey Boys, and 42, Stage 42, is a number of seats. It's a much larger house than any of the theaters in New World Stages. Do you think that this show can continue to run and fill the house?
If we knew what could fill a show, we'd be producers.
That's right.
I think the answer is we both believe that it should.
Well, it's been a pleasure, Brian, as always, to have you.
Thank you for having me, as always. I so enjoyed it.
And that is our show for this evening. And when you go to the theater, look for Leslie and me, us two plus one.
On the Aisle.